Welcome to the Ballet Help Desk podcast. My name is Jenny, and I'm joined by my co-founder, Brett. We are both proud ballet moms who met backstage at our children's recital. During our kids' training, we found that resources were limited. We relied on Dance Magazine and fellow parents in the lobby for information. Now that our children are embarking on their professional careers, we're excited to share our combined 20 years of experience as ballet moms with all of you. We'll be bringing in experts to help make sense of this complex world of ballet training. Welcome back to week 3 of our Summer Intensive Bootcamp series. We've switched things up a little bit, and we're very excited to host our first roundtable conversation with parents of boy dancers. In this discussion, we'll cover a wide variety of topics, including how each parent approached helping their son choose a summer intensive, experiences with bullying, and much, much more. We hope you enjoy this insightful conversation with Brett Gardner, Thea Alexander, Robert Rodenberger, and Raven Mathis. Welcome back to the Ballet Help Desk. I am Jenny Huang, and I am joined by my co-founder Brett today, but in a little bit of a different capacity. Today, we are doing our first ever roundtable, and Brett is going to be one of the participants in the roundtable we're discussing boys and summer intensives today. So why don't we get started? If everyone could just introduce themselves and tell us your son's name, where he dances now or where he used to dance, and what summer intensives he's attended. Brett, why don't you get started?
Okay. For those listening, I know you guys have heard about my son a lot. His name's Sam. He is in the second year of a 2-year program for the second company for Houston Ballet. They call it HB2. Summer programs. So he's been to a lot of them. He started early. He started when he was 10. And his first one was at the Joffrey Ballet School in LA at Cal State Northridge, and it was like a jazz and contemporary program. And then he went to Joffrey Academy in Chicago, and then went to ABT in Orange County and San Francisco when he was he was 11 when he went to Joffrey Academy. When he was 12, he went to ABT Orange County and San Francisco. When he was 13, he went to Houston. When he was 14, he went to Houston. Then COVID hit. He went nowhere. And then after COVID, he went to SAB, School of American Ballet in New York, and Royal Ballet. And that was the end of his summer intensives. Then he went off to Houston.
I'm Thea. My son is Alden. He goes to the Rock School in Philadelphia. This is his second year there. And prior to that, he danced at our local studio, Barron Dance Center. So for summer intensives, he's actually only been to 4 different intensives. He, at 13, went to Pacific Northwest Ballet. Then 14 was COVID. So he did Boston virtually. Then at 15 and 16, he went to Boston in person. And then this last summer, he did Pittsburgh Ballet Theater's company intensive, and then went to San Francisco Ballet.
Hi, my son is Vaughn, and he is currently training at Ballet West in their professional training division. And we haven't been to too many summer intensives because he's just 15. He started off at Ballet West. He went to Boston Ballet. And then last year he went to Oklahoma City.
I'm Robert Rodenberger, and my son is Noah Rodenberger, and he's 17. And he's currently at Sarasota and the studio company. And summer intensives he's attended previously. We're from Georgia, so he was at Georgia Ballet for his first one. Stayed locally, and then Orlando, Atlanta. He also did 2 summers BBSI, the 2-week program.
The Boys Ballet Summer Intensive?
Yes.
Yeah.
In Cary, and then Next Generation Ballet, Sarasota Cuban, and then most recently Sarasota Ballet. But he was also an exchange student with the National Ballet of Canada and Sarasota's exchange program for their summer intensive.
I love it. We have such a wide variety of summer experiences. I think this is going to be really informative for all of our listeners. So, Raven, could you talk about how your son started or began dancing?
We were in Louisville, Kentucky, and he really, really, really wanted to dance, but we weren't in a position to do that. So when we moved to Utah, to a very rural area, he kept begging to dance, kept begging to dance. And I actually called around we had 3 studios here at the time, and only one of them would accept a boy.
Hmm.
You're kidding.
Yeah, so it's
Wow.
very interesting experience for me as a parent. He started at a local studio called Powerhouse, and he danced there from 6 until 13.
Oh my gosh, can I ask you why they said they wouldn't accept a boy?
I could give you a lot of guesses. I could give you a lot of assumptions. I just know that a lot of times whenever we would have him at the dance studio, people would come up to me and go, I would love to put my son in dance, but my husband would never let that happen. And so I think it has a lot to do with the culture here, because we are a very rural, small town. We're 3 hours away from the nearest Target, if that helps situate how rural we
my.
are. I think it's just the culture here has never really been as up to date, I guess you could say, as it would be in a major metropolitan city, or, where you have more pockets of acceptance.
Oh my gosh. Has anyone else had that experience where their son just wasn't even allowed to come or show up or was asked to leave?
I didn't have that, but when we were looking at ballet studios, we had a couple, even in the Bay Area, who sort of scratched their heads and said, well, yeah, we definitely take boys, but it was one of those where it was like, great, we'll take him, but we don't really know what to do with him.
We had kind of the opposite experience. Where we are, we just like the closest local ballet studio. I mean, it's a ballet school, had just a big boys program. Like they had a dedicated boys program from little tinies. I danced growing up, and I've always said that had nothing to do with Alden dancing. I don't think that's true, but I didn't think I wanted him to dance. And I tried to keep him out of it, but he was playing all kinds of sports. And he and another boy from his soccer team both wanted to go dance. So they did like the summer boys intro program together. So he went to his first ballet class with a boy from his soccer team. I think culturally it's maybe the opposite of Raven's experience there. And they were in an all boys class. It was maybe 6 boys, but it was, come for 4 weeks, all boys, see what dance is like.
That's amazing. So, Raven, can I ask you a question about that? So,
yeah.
How did you kind of keep your son going when he said he wanted to dance and when there were so many roadblocks?
I would like to take credit for it, but he has been I love ballet kid from the first minute that he stepped in the studio. And he's just had a drive and a passion for it. It fuels him. He rather do ballet than anything else. And I also think that his first teacher at the local studio definitely knew how to appreciate having him there and having a boy at the studio. And she was always talking, even when he was young, about the exciting things that she had planned for him down the line. So I think that helped a lot.
I'm sure. And, these kids really do have a passion within them to keep moving forward, but it does get tricky when you are the only boy. So speaking of that, Robert, was your son the only boy in his class? And if so, how long did that last?
Our experience was a little bit different. He started at 10 in a once-a-week hip-hop class that was located in a strip center where my art studio was. And the owners came in, and after school, he would be there with me, and they're like, hey, Noah, why don't you come down and take a class? And that's how it started. And he did that for 1 year. And then the next year, he also did the hip-hop class. And they said, hey, Noah, since you're here and these other girls, and there's one other boy, but he was older, there's an introduction to ballet class, and we kind of need a boy prop. So they get used to having a boy around. And he's like, okay, because they said, you can wear gym shorts. You just have to get a pair of ballet shoes. And he's like, okay. He fell in love with it. And that's what started the journey. Everywhere he's been, he's never been the only boy. There's always been at least one, but most of the time there were 4 or 5 or more. And after he decided he wanted more and he wanted to learn more in that particular studio, it was a small, mom and pop kind of studio. And he was trying to learn how to do a pirouette. He didn't feel like the instructor was giving him enough, like instruction. The instructor was being too nice. That's good enough. And Noah's like, no, I want to learn how to do it right.
Oh, good for him.
Yeah. And so we landed up going to another studio that was local, and they immediately put him into, first level and about 7 hours a week. So he was so happy. And at that studio, there was a high school boy, and Noah, being 11 years old, he idolized this boy. This boy was a rock star. Boy graciously took Noah under his wing and helped him to understand, what to do. This is how you do it. And it was just super cool. And I think that all throughout Noah's experience, because he also started, ballet, he really started at almost 12, and he's 17 now. He's been very fortunate that he's had older boys as role models, kind instructors. That being said, I think every family is different. And my family, where I'm an artist, I'm a working family, Noah saw me working all the time. He went to art shows with me. He helped me set up the tent. He was used to, if you want this to happen, then it takes work. And it may not always be easy. So I think that was something that he had in his tool set that really helped him navigate through. And we never, ever had any problems. He was never bullied. A funny story, when we transitioned from private school to public school, and then we had to go from public school, obviously, to online school for the conservatory, when he entered conservatory. But when he was in middle school, I was nervous a little bit about Noah being bullied about it,
Right.
But one day he came home and he said, "Hey, Dad," he said, "this guy came up to me in the hallway and said, 'Hey, I heard you do ballet.'" And Noah's like, "Yeah." And the guy said, "Are you gay?" Really condescending. And Noah said, "No, but my 2 dads are."
Perfect answer.
And just kind of, took the rug out from under the guy's feet. The guy was like, "Okay, I got nothing," and just
Right.
walked off. So
That's a great way to kind of take all the wind out of that sail.
yeah. We've always been honest with him and given him the opportunity to speak his mind and be proud of who he is. And being the family type that we are, that's how we live. We are proud who we are. Everyone is who they are, but we are no different from anybody else. We're a family too, and we go through all the things that every family goes through.
So, Brett, can I ask you? I know Sam was the only boy for quite some time, in all through his dance journey for quite a while.
Yeah, he was. There were a couple of other boys in the studio for maybe a year. And before he did ballet, he was a competition dancer. So he did like jazz and tap and all that. And then he was the only boy in all of those things. A lot of the teachers that were teaching him at the time didn't necessarily know how to choreograph for a boy. So they had to figure that out. And then when he moved to a ballet studio, he took ballet classes at a number of different studios, trying to figure out one that would actually work for him. Most of those places, he was the only boy. Fortunately, most of them had male teachers. And so the male teacher was like, "Oh, awesome, a boy. I can do something with this." And when he finally landed at the ballet studio close to our house, the teacher that he was working with was a longtime professional dancer, was a guy. Then it was great. It was wonderful. But he did have to take class with the girls. And so it ended up being kind of a split class where the girls would do their thing, and then the male teacher would have Sam do his thing. And I'm sure it was a challenge for them to try to do both, but they were really supportive of him and they pushed him really hard. And the thing, one of the things that Jenny, you and I had talked to Patrick Frenette about was, don't take your boy at your studio and like hold him up and be like, "Yay, we have a boy. Here he is front and center, and he's in all our advertising." And the thing that our studio did was they didn't do that to him. They held him to high standards. They pushed him. He didn't get away with stuff because he was a boy. He had to wear the uniform just like everybody else. And so, yeah, he was the only boy, and that was a challenge, especially as he got older. But when he was younger, I think the studio did a really good job of supporting him and not making him a target just because of his gender.
Can we talk a little bit about the hurdles that some of your boys faced? If they did, if there was bullying for them, if they did struggle with some of those things. But yeah, could you talk about some of the hurdles, whatever you feel comfortable with it, or if it was kind of easy for him?
Sure. So as I mentioned, we were lucky because we did have a local studio that had a dedicated boys program. And at the time it was kind of, oh, if you have a boy who wants to dance, this was sort of where all the boys were. And I know we'll talk about it later with summer intensives, but boys kind of cluster in one spot. So there's actually just where we are, there's a lot of strong foundational classical ballet schools that kids get good training at within a fairly small radius. He went to that school. I have to say, actually, like where he got bullied was at ballet, much
Really?
more than at school. They were a really large group of boys. I think actually in one of your other podcasts, Peter Stark talked a little bit about how sort of bad behavior gets like let go with boys sometimes.
Yep.
And there was definitely maybe like a boys will be boys kind of mentality. And so there was this large group of boys and they were together in class, but they were pretty frequently like kind of obstreperous in the studios, you know, banging around in the dressing room, breaking things, breaking rules, but also like breaking things in a way that the girls in the studio did not do and wouldn't have been allowed to continue to do. And it did get kind of like really bad and then got stopped. And I don't think that that's still a culture at that studio. But in among there was also like some bullying, bigger boys bullying littler boys, which just like really classic old school bullying. And then also my son had long hair. He wore his hair in locks and it was like down his back. So he got some really, I mean, from little kids. So it doesn't make a lot of sense, but bullying doesn't have to make a lot of sense. So he got a lot of homophobic bullying before he even was old enough to have any sense of what his sexuality was.
Simply because he had long hair?
Because he had long hair, and like they equated sort of like gender presentation or like gender expression with sexuality, which we know like those are different things. And he was a boy with long hair. He wasn't trying to be a girl. But yeah, he had long hair. So that was tough. And that was at ballet. And that did also trickle into school. In his elementary school, he was fine. He changed elementary schools and like then had to introduce himself to new kids. And that was the first time that at school, he found out that people thought it was like weird that he did ballet because everybody else had known him since he started, and other kids started at the same time as him, other kids on the same team. So it was when he had to sort of introduce himself at a new school. I remember they had to like decorate a tissue box about themselves, and he put like a whole bunch of ballet stuff on it. And they, stood up on the first day of school and presented their tissue box about themselves. And he came home from school and was like, they said it was weird. Like people laughed at me. Why did they laugh at me? I think that was maybe like the first time he really had a hard time with being a boy who did ballet. But then not a ton more after that. His friend group after that was primarily girls. And then he went to middle school and his friend group was just like they look like the Breakfast Club, like a real eclectic mix of like artsy kids. But it was really just that transition from one elementary school to another and having to introduce himself as a kid who danced.
How did you handle that as a parent? If you could maybe talk to how you kind of helped coach him through that, which must have been a really hard time. Not
as well as I would have liked to. I mean, I think, you're only living the life that you're living, and he's my only one. And so everything that happens with him is the first time.
Yep.
I think I would give different advice now to someone with a younger kid. But at the time, I wanted to sort of affirm who he was and help him feel confident. He didn't have a good one-liner comeback like how Robert's son had, right? Like he didn't have something sort of like locked and loaded, and this is what someone might say to me, and this is what I will say back. And I think that would have been really helpful to him.
Well, and can I add that I think because maybe it was just a natural thing for our family to prepare him because of our family. I wanted to give him the power, and the confidence to say, well, this is who I am and this is who my family is, and we're proud. I mean, when Noah was in, I think, second grade, and we had the first parent teacher conference, the teacher was just like, I've got to tell you something. I was like, what? And she said, well, the first day we were like, everybody stand up, introduce yourself, and tell something special about yourself. And he stood up and he said, hi, my name's Noah, and I have two dads. And she was kind of shocked and surprised. And I was like, and the impression I got was like, shouldn't that be a secret? Yeah, we early on, I think as parents, sometimes you don't know. There is no guidebook, and we just kind of figure it out along the way. And I think anybody in their lives who has had a little bit of a struggle, personal struggle, to fit in and navigate through society, which I'm speaking of myself growing up, one thing I wanted to give my child was that early on. If there's something, one of the many things that we can do as parents to our children, part of our legacy for our children is to give them the tools to navigate through life and the wisdom and what worked for us and what didn't. And here's some information. And
no, absolutely. And every generation you try to do it a little better. That's one of the reasons why we're doing this podcast, right? Because, hindsight's 2020. It's a lot easier for me to kind of look at someone who has a 12-year-old and say, oh, I could totally tell you all these things. And I'm sure you now could have a whole bunch of different advice you could give for someone who's struggling with a 12-year-old being bullied in the studio. Like, oh, I've got you covered, because now you can go back a little bit more, which is why we're doing this, to kind of help give people pearls and some more language and some better ways. Raven, how about you?
I also want to mention that sometimes bullying doesn't always come from peers. Sometimes it comes from within your family, and you have to deal with that as well. So that's something that if people are trying to navigate that, being an advocate for your child, I know we had family members that weren't outright dismissive of ballet in general, but because there were no other boys in our area, it became oh, that'll be great for football. That'll be great for when you learn how to high jump in track, just different things where it was always ballet was a precursor to something else for them. And Vaughn felt more impacted by that because, like Thea was saying, when you started in elementary school and that kind of, you all grow together with that identity. For Vaughn, again, town mentality, he started at kindergarten and went with the same kids clear until 8th grade. And so all they knew was Vaughn the dancer. So it was, we were really lucky that it was a little bit more of an acceptance. I mean, things were said as they usually are, but most of the stuff that we had to deal with that impacted Vaughn came from within our family, extended family. And so that was a tricky thing to navigate because you want to keep those family bonds strong, but you also want to say, hey, that's my kid. This is what he likes to do. It's not a precursor to something else. We would really appreciate if you could respect that.
How did that go? If it's too personal, don't. But, I'm sure there are several parents out there who are like, oh my gosh, that's happening to me. So kind of how did those conversations go? And do you feel like your family did respond to you at some point positively?
I feel like there were definitely family members that caught on a little bit quicker than others. It wasn't until Vaughn made the move to Ballet West that the stragglers came along. And one particular family member is definitely realizing the impact that their words had on Vaughn when he was younger and are actively trying to repair that in a way of respecting what he's doing now.
I think it's really interesting that you were talking about once he ended up at Ballet West. And this is where I think there's a huge double standard that exists between girls and boys. If you're a girl it is okay to dance recreationally. Like my older one, my daughter was not a dancer. She played soccer, she played tennis, she played basketball. None of it was ever going to lead to a college or a professional career. And everyone was like, oh, that's great. You're a soccer player. You're a tennis player. Yay for you. But if you have a boy that does anything in dance that is not destined for a career, it's not okay. And I find that to be a real problem. And, when you say, oh, once it became clear that he was really good at this and he was going to be okay and do this as a career, then it's okay. But if they just like it because they like it, ooh, there's got to be something wrong. And it's not just family members. Like when Sam was at his competition studio before he got into ballet, I'll never forget, my daughter and I were there picking him up, and we were not allowed to come and watch. Like we couldn't look in the window, but we snuck up and we wanted to see what was going on. And he was maybe like, I don't know, 9. And there's a dad there with one of his other kids. And he turns to his kid and he's like, is that a boy in there? What's he doing in there? And my daughter, you could just see the claws come out. And she turned to the guy and she goes, that's my brother. And you could tell the guy was like, he was embarrassed, right? And he was like, oh, I got busted. I shouldn't have said that. It's everywhere. And we live in the San Francisco Bay Area. Like we are the epicenter of liberalism. And we still would get it pretty regularly, not from family members, but from adults who are like, oh, does he want to use that to get a college scholarship? Like, is that his angle? And I'm like, no, he just really likes to dance. He's 10. He's not even thinking about college. He just likes it. But with boys, you're not allowed to just like it. There has to be an end game.
And can I add that back to the family? And nobody ever, in our case, said anything cruel or negative about it, but it was kind of like the look and the head scratch, like, ballet, really? So to me, very often it's about education. So once I invited specifically certain family members to come see Noah on stage in a production, then that's when the light bulb went off for them, like, oh, yeah, that looks really hard. That's quite a high jump there and everything that they do. And seeing the older man, we're like in Georgia Ballet, luckily where we started ballet, seriously, it being connected to a company made a huge difference, because the company males were, again, like somebody he could look up to and he got to perform with. And as he moved up, he eventually got to be in class with. And so he always had that positive role model, older positive role model. That really made a difference.
Yeah, I can imagine it must be so hard being the few and then getting to a space where there's the many. Talking about that, let's jump into how you chose to send your boys to summer intensives, where you chose to send them. So, Raven, if you wouldn't mind talking about, when did you send him to his first summer intensive? And can you talk about maybe some of the research you did on some of the deciding factors for you?
Sure. We hit the whole, because, you can't avoid talking about it, the pandemic. And we started in doing Francisco Gella's online classes. And then Vaughn started taking private lessons weekly via Zoom, because it worked for some kids, it didn't work for others. For Vaughn, he was eating it up. He really, really took to it. And so it was at that point where Fran sat down with me for a second at the end of one of their lessons and said, hey, are we thinking about summer intensives? What are we doing? And I said, I don't want to send him anywhere until he's 13, because he wasn't turning 13 until the following summer. And so he's like, okay, well, research it. And he was a really good resource, because I sent him a long, long email and said, this is what we've got going on here. I was super, super honest about it. I know some people aren't like that. Some people like to hold back information, but I just laid it all out there and I said, please help us. And so he kind of started me in a direction, to which then I got on Google and found an anonymous ballet board that really kind of helped me get into different summer intensives and seeing different people's experiences and learning something very key for our own journey is not every summer is the same at an intensive. So I tried to look at some intensives that were more consistent in the experiences because, you had years of different reviews. And then I got on Facebook groups, went from there with asking my questions. A lot of times looking back now, I'm like, oh, that was answered so many times before. And I did not look, but I was just so thankful that the parents, especially on the male centered group, were just really gentle and really nice. And I think that is kind of how I personally became more comfortable with the idea of just shipping my kid off for 3, 5, Oklahoma is 6 weeks at a time and just kind of putting them out there in the world. And then Vaughn, as soon as Fran said summer intensive, he wanted to go to the one that he knew that was the closest, that we had been to multiple ballets from the company. And so that's how we ended up at Ballet West the first summer.
Robert, can you talk about that with Noah? What age and then how you made the decision?
Well, when he was 12 at Georgia Ballet, the school director said, I want to keep him here for the first summer. We knew nothing about ballet. It was hard trying to figure out as a parent, what are you supposed to do? And then, I heard this thing about summer intensives. And I'm like, oh, I'm not ready to send my child away anywhere. Right. So I was relieved when she said, let's keep him close. Let's keep him at home. Then the next summer, he auditioned. I can't remember. Oh, it was Orlando. And I'm going to be totally honest. The reason we picked Orlando is because we approved it as parents because it was a secure building. When we read about it and then went to go see it and, dropping him off and the doors were locked and there was a parent coming up to the door, carrying a load in. And I started to make my way to the door in the lobby to open the door. And I think she was the director, said, no, don't open the door. I'll do that. And I was like, oh, okay, I like it. I'm okay. He's safe. But it was a good first get away from home. Let the parents know that you're going to be okay. It was a safe environment. So I'm glad we did that for the first one. And then, of course, the pandemic happened.
So let me ask you a question about that. One of the things that I know we did when Sam was younger and that we tell a lot of other parents is when kids are 12 or 13, I'm just curious of how many of you paid attention to the type of technique that was taught or even the quality versus are they going to find their people and have a good time?
It was safety for me. Safety.
Yeah, sure.
Thea, how about you?
For me, I think it was much more ballet focused. I grew up dancing, so I had opinions about programs, and some of them were probably outdated. I think I've mentioned to Raven in the past, Evelyn Cisneros runs Ballet West Academy, and that makes my eyes get big, but that's because she was the prima ballerina at San Francisco when I was growing up. So she's a big deal to me in a way that she probably isn't to the kids who are there, right? Alden was not going to go away for summer until 14. I had opinions that were left over from when I was training. That was when you went, right? It was for students in high school, really. And he started as a beginner at 8. He didn't do pre-ballet as a little kid. He didn't do creative movement. 8 years old is when you start. Some real opinions that I would let go at this point. When he started, I asked, at the time I was still taking class, and I asked one of my teachers, who was also a teacher in the academy there, when do kids have to go? I know people are going away at 10 and 11 to these junior programs. And she said, no, it really is still 14. He can still stay home until 14. He can do the local intensives. So that was our plan. Alden is autistic. And so the year that he was 13, with the idea that he was going to go away at 14, I wanted him to do an audition season. He's, Asperger's type. So he's extremely high functioning, but new things are very hard for him. And so I wanted him to have had the experience of an audition season when it didn't matter. And so that audition season, I just picked 4 programs that were coming to town and that were like quite different. Actually, Jenny, like I've heard you talk about, kind of like college applications. I tried to do sort of a range. I was actually hoping that he'd have the experience of like some acceptance, some rejection, maybe a scholarship from somewhere, so that like we could get all of that handled. He didn't really quite get the breadth of experience on the results that I anticipated, but we did. So like he did the rock school, which at the time, rock doesn't do this anymore, but at the time, the rock took kids like as young as 8. So it was really like a level placement kind of an audition. And they gave you your results on the spot.
Oh my.
So that was something I knew about that program. And so I used to really recommend it to people as a first audition, if you could get your kid there first, because they were almost certainly going to be accepted. And they get to have those results like before they leave. They do the audition, then they go wait in the waiting room, and then they call them back in and they hand out their results. And so it's like this great instant gratification, right? So he did the rock, he did Washington Ballet, which was local to us. He did Ballet West, and he did PNB, which I thought would be a rejection for him so that he could have that experience. He did not get the experience of a rejection from PNB, got a big scholarship, and then wanted to go. And I was like, yeah, we're not going to say no. My mom was local. So like my mom lived in Seattle. So he didn't stay in the dorms. He went and stayed with her and went as a commuter. And, but that was actually a great program for him. I wouldn't have sent him someplace just for fun. It wouldn't have been sort of worth it to him, but that ended up being a nice balance.
Yeah, sometimes it is surprising, right? Where you're like, okay, I want to set this up perfectly so he can kind of experience all of what happens in ballet, right? The rejection, the acceptance, the scholarship, all of this. And then all of a sudden that all goes to pot, right? It's like,
yeah.
Oh, well, okay. I mean, so was the scholarship kind of the deciding factor for you? I'm sorry, and if you're not comfortable talking about that, but was it like,
no, it's fine.
What are some like deciding factors for you that really did make a difference? Especially because you weren't going to have him go that year. Was it just like, okay, how can we say no to PNB? Or were there more factors? Was he really like saying, you know what, I really do want to go? Or how did that kind of work for your family?
The scholarships always make a big deal for our family for 2 reasons, but one is the actual cost, right? And I know that as a parent of a boy, that is different than girls sometimes, although girls, I got scholarships. So like and I know people think all boys get scholarships, but I think that also goes back to Brett's point of like all of the boys going to summer intensives are eyeing professional careers, right? Like it's a different pot of people. They're not going for fun. Like there just aren't that many boys dancing recreationally. For me, it was sort of that the scholarship was like a nod toward his potential in a way that I wasn't until then confident existed. And I really thought it was important to like let him go see that through.
Oh, that's interesting. So it was like an affirmation for you.
Like it was an affirmation for me that like, okay, maybe this is a path he can follow, but it was kind of a maybe this is a path he can follow. He was 13. He's built a certain way. Like he does like physically have like the skeleton of a ballet dancer, right? He has long limbs and a long neck and a small head, built a certain way, and he's tall. But I wanted to just see, like, did you just look good in an audition? Or if they get you a whole summer, what will they think of you? Let me go just get eyes on you somewhere else. And so I thought that was important to let him do that. And we could afford it because the scholarship covered his tuition and my mother was local. So I paid for a plane ticket. But yeah, I thought that was important to see how that played out.
Brett, can you talk? I know you've talked a little bit before on different ones, but you're a guest here today. So can you talk a little bit about Sam, what made you kind of decide to send him away for summers, and then how you kind of approached your research a little bit?
Sure. So Sam's a second kid. Let me just start with that, which meant, growing up, he got ignored because his older one was busy, or his older sister was busy. And so as a result, he's a really independent kid. So we didn't have concerns about sending him away when he was younger because it was something he really wanted to do. So research, the first one we went to that He went to that one because I found an ad in Dance Magazine, and that was like it. Like, I didn't know anything about summer intensives, and because he was in a competition studio, not a ballet studio, he went to Joffrey Ballet School because that was where the big ad was in I think Dance Spirit. So there was not a lot of research as much as we can drive there, we can get an Airbnb, and he can go and we can see what this whole thing is about. When he went to Joffrey Academy, once I figured out the difference between Joffrey Academy and Joffrey Ballet School, which
Because there is a difference.
there is a difference, and I think we should write a blog post about it as part of our summer intensive boot camp. I had him go to Joffrey Academy in Chicago. It was super selfish. Like, it was a junior program that had housing, and he wanted to go away for more than a week. And it was one of the few junior programs that allowed you to do that. And I lived in Chicago for 7 years, and I wanted to see my friends. So I pushed him really hard, like, go to Joffrey, you'll have a great time. I'll fly out with you and I'll go hang out with all my friends. And then I'll come back and get you, and I'll get to hang out with my friends more. So again, there wasn't a lot of research beyond it's a junior program with housing, and he really wanted to be in the dorms. And then as he got older, I would like to say I did a lot of homework. When he was 12, it was all about scheduling. He went to the programs that fit our summer schedule. We did a family reunion every summer on the East Coast, and there were 2 programs that fit with the other commitments we had for the summer. And one was in Orange County. It was ABT Orange County, and they had housing. And he just flatly refused to go anywhere that didn't have a dorm. And then he did San Francisco because he did a ballet competition, and they gave him a thing to go to program 1, which was 3 weeks. And he took the subway up every day and hated that because he wanted to be in the dorms with everybody else. And then the first year he went to Houston for the summer when he was 13. After that, Sam kind of took over. Like, he knew where he wanted to go. And so he had his list. And you also have to remember, when he was 11, when he was 10, 11, 12, the resources weren't there. Like, there were no Facebook groups. There were no, there was that anonymous message board, but it was mostly girls that were parents of girls that were reviewing the programs. And I found one blog that was about a male dancer, and I read it like from beginning to end in 8 hours. But that was really kind of it in terms of resources. So you really had to rely on what you had, which was ads in magazines and other parents. And it happened to be that there was one mom who said, oh yeah, he's got to go to Houston. So that was all I needed to hear. And he went, and she was right. There were a ton of boys in Houston, and that was fantastic because there were a ton of boys who were really, really talented, and he saw what was out there. And I think that was a real eye opener for him. But, the resources that exist now are just so much greater. Everything from social media to, what we're doing to, there's a bunch of blogs out there, and there's parents who I feel like just know a lot more than I did when I was trying to get Sam along this path.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how much consideration did you guys give to, how many boys were typically at each program? Was that like a real deciding factor for you as you were making these decisions?
That was our primary focus with Vaughn. Vaughn was very excited because prior to stepping into just doing ballet, he was also doing other dance styles and doing competition teams. Mm-hmm. So he would go to things like Nuvo and 24/7. And whenever he would go to those, there would be 1 or 2 other boys. And like Thea was saying, they just gravitate towards each other and build their own little tiny community instantly. And he really, really enjoyed that. So when we were looking at programs, I didn't necessarily need it to be a men's program where it was just the men were just together all the time. It just, for us at that time, and I'm sure Vaughn would say different now because now he's kind of making his own choices. But at that time, I just wanted a men's class. And I knew that Ballet West offered that the boys at some point in the day, I think at the time, every day of the week had a men's class, especially being in a studio with the studio director is a female and his competition team instructor was a female, and he really wasn't getting the men's technique. And Fran noted him and he said, hey, he needs to get in and start learning these things. Not that where you're at is not great, but he needs to learn these things too. And so for us, it was pretty much a deciding factor. It did take out a few smaller programs that were more of like a local thing. And by local, I mean 3 hours east of us in Salt Lake. So it'd still be a travel thing, but it really took out some of the smaller ones that were like only a week where I could go stay with him. And men's classes were super important for us.
Robert?
The men's classes were, of course, always important. Looking at a summer intensive, he always had boys in the program he was in. So it was just a different experience. So with Noah, I think he wanted to try some different things for summer intensive. Like he went to Sarasota Cuban one summer because he wanted to explore that a little bit more. If there was something that he wanted to work on, he was looking around, where could I get this experience? Who were the teachers?
Wanted to follow teachers more than boys.
Well, it was a team effort. It was a combination. It's like, where are we going to agree to let you go to? Where do we feel like it would be good for you to go? COVID did interfere with Houston, and Houston actually contacted Atlanta Ballet and say, hey, we have this kid with scholarship. Cool to you. Can you take him for the summer? They were really great about doing that.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's interesting. We always did consider those who gave scholarships. We've always told Noah that whatever you were interested in, wherever your passion lands, even though it may not be something we're interested in, we're going to get behind you and help you. And that was a promise we always kept to him. Where Noah landed in Sarasota, he never went to their summer intensive. Christopher Hurd, the school director, saw him at YAGP and expressed an interest. And thank goodness he landed in Sarasota, because it's such a good program and he's obviously thrived there. He, instead of being a trainee for 2 years, he was only a trainee for 1 year. And he got the studio company contract 2 days before his 17th birthday. When we looked at any program, being a ballet dancer is a part of who Noah is. It doesn't define him. He's a person. All the factors of who he is as a person is part of what we consider about where you're going to go, what's there, why do you want to go there, what can you get out of it. Just because it was a program, a lot of the programs will boast that they have a lot of boys for summer intensive. That was not necessarily appealing to Noah, because he was like, well, I don't want to be one of the ones standing in the back of the room. I want to get help. I want to get better. I want to continue to get better. I want to work for the best company that I can ever get into one day. So I have to continuously get better and improve. He was very focused on that for himself, very goal-driven as far as his skills, and very disciplined about it. So it didn't really matter the size of the program. I mean, it would matter if they didn't have a men's program or men's classes, obviously, that's a given. But it was just a part of his thinking is like, where could I go that I would get the most out of it? It doesn't have to be a huge program. Who's there? What are they known for as far as instructors? And he would also look at and ask his friends, the other guys, have you been there? Did you like it? Did you get a lot out of it? What was your experience like? So the boys are very supportive of one another, and they do share a lot with one another. And it's an important part, I think, of being a ballet boy, is that fraternity.
I just had something I wanted to add. Something Robert said made me think of this, and it's different kids are different and what they need is different out of a program. Robert mentioned that Noah, didn't want to go someplace with a ton of boys and be the one standing in the back. I think for Alden, that actually was something he was looking for. By the time he started going to summer intensives, we had actually moved him from that first local studio with a lot of boys to a different local studio that just had a different vibe. But he was then one of only 3 serious boys and the youngest of them. So that was great because he had the 2 older boys to look up to in class. But then, they started to graduate, and there weren't like actual peers. So getting a sense there of he was always going to be behind them, and how far behind them is too far behind them, right? Like they are a couple of years older, so they should be better than you, but you don't have anybody to sort of like gauge yourself with. And I think Alden always really was looking for a program where he could kind of be the bottom of the top.
He wanted someone to chase.
Yeah. And really be sort of, you know, he'd like to be in the middle level. Like, so a program that had enough boys that there are levels of boys and not just all the boys are going to be together. And then, you know, the first year that he was the first in-person year at Boston, he started off, they had just 2 levels and he was in the lower of the 2 levels. And then they split that lower level into 2 levels and he got moved into the middle level. And that felt perfect for him. Yes, like I'm in a level that is people my age and a year older. I am where I am supposed to be, but there are also people my age in the level above me, and there's also people my age in the level below me. So like I have a sense that where I am is where I'm supposed to be. And there are boys more advanced than me that I can chase, right? There are people that or like I'm better at one thing and they're better at something else. Like it was the kind of the first summer that he was able to say like, well, I'm the best jumper in our class. He started to figure out like what is his strength, right? Like this is a thing about me that's different than other guys, and this is the thing that I'm best at. So I think that was really important to him every year, to be where there was enough boys that he wasn't always going to be in the front, that he wasn't going to always be the best boy.
Has everyone's son participated in YAGP or one of the other competitions through the years?
Sam did. Sam did YAGP, World Ballet, and California Dance Classics.
Yeah, Noah did the YAGP, UBC, and ADC, IBC. And I have to say, any of the competitions in our experience were instrumental for the exposure. Noah would always get plenty of offers, scholarships, full scholarships. It was almost overwhelming to the point we don't know what to do. You know, when you have too many choices, sometimes it's.
I think a lot of people would call that a high quality problem, Robert.
No, and I disagree. I totally disagree with that. You know, because as a parent, you feel responsible for helping your child make the best decision. And if you're
I'm
like
actually
us,
joking with you. I think that's actually true. When you do have too many options, it does get tricky. And, you know, have you found that as boys? Like that sometimes it is hard. If you have several offers and several scholarships, how do you choose? What is your deciding factor? And I do think that that's tricky without a lot of guidance.
Yeah, and for us, it was doing as much research as we could, talk to other parents if their child went there, or information, and you just kind of go with it, because if you pick one and you're like, oh, was the other one going to be better? I don't know, but I think everything is an important experience. They learn something from every experience, every summer intensive.
Sure, but do you have some regrets? Like, is there a program you really regret or a mistake you really feel like you made?
No, and I even asked Noah last night, do you have any regrets? Because I don't know that we do, and he said no. Well, it's not really regret. It was because COVID. He did want to go to Houston one summer. Regret, no, but it would have been nice if he could have experienced that. But I was talking to Noah about this very thing, and the belief that we have in our family is things work out the way they're supposed to. And I know from personal experience, if I try to get involved and fix something or make something happen, sometimes that's the wrong thing to do. And
sure, isn't that best laid plans, or you make plans and God laughs? Isn't that kind of the saying?
Yeah. And so if he had gone to Houston, would he have landed up at Sarasota? Who knows?
Sure.
It turns out that where he did land was the best place for him, and it's just such a good program, and the company and everything that happened, it just fell into place. So therefore, you don't have to look back and go, well, what if? Because it's fine the way it is.
Jenny, you were talking about hurdles, and not to step on Robert. I hope that I didn't step on the end of your comment there. I will say that, or regrets, I will say that we've never had a regret in And I say we because I've spoken to Vaughn about it and stuff, and I'd like to kind of include myself in helping with the decision a little bit, because we're that kind of a family where, you know, it's a unit. We don't really have any regrets of, oh, I wish I would have gone to that instead of picking this. But there are hurdles that I think that we've had with having a boy in ballet and being, again, in a rural program where training was something that he kind of ran his course here with, like I mentioned before, Francisco saying, hey, he's got to get some of this men's lingo down. He has to get some of these men's moves, catch up a little bit. And like Robert was saying, you know, you got to use your gut. If you're trying to do something and it's just feeling icky, it's probably not the right choice. We sent him out to Ballet West that first summer, and he came home with an offer to stay for year round. And my husband and I were at dinner that night waiting to go watch the performance. And I couldn't even eat dinner. I was just so anxious because we thought that we were just going to say yes. We were going to move to Salt Lake, my son and I, and we were just going to do it. And so along the lines of regrets, I don't necessarily regret, quote unquote, making him come home for another year, but it is something that I don't question, but I wonder where he'd be had we gone a year earlier. I know my son wishes he would have went a year earlier, but that's just, I mean, every ballet kid is like, yeah, I want to go where I want to go and I want to be there tomorrow.
May I ask you, if you don't mind sharing, what was the thing that really held you guys back from saying yes? I understand family dynamic and all of those kinds of things, but like, if you're being reflective on like what those choices were, and I do regret making that decision, something that could be helpful for parents, nothing, if it's personal or any of those things, please, we'll edit all of this out. But you know.
No, I am an open book. I will totally share. I believe in my story, whether you want, you know, you might not want to listen to it, but somebody else might find it interesting or helpful or be in the same situation. I was nervous. It was August and we picked him up. And so we had a month to turn around and find a place to live in Salt Lake City, get him enrolled in a school. We had to split the household. Vaughn is our only child. So it wasn't too difficult to make the decision to split up for that time being because of things like FaceTime. It's a 3-hour drive, and Vaughn and I were making that drive every other weekend anyways to take master classes. And he was studying at Central Utah Ballet for a school year on the weekends. And so I think it was, at the time, the tech trio with Francisco Gella was still going. So we knew we had that to supplement the instruction at our home studio. And then we also knew that we had Central Utah Ballet. Jenny King was so gracious in just allowing him to come in, didn't charge us tuition or anything. She was amazing. And I am so thankful for her and what she did for Vaughn. I think if I didn't have those two things, I would have made a huge mistake and I really would have regretted it. Things have worked out really well. It's been great. It was definitely a lot of, I am a type A parent. I like to be probably detrimentally proactive. I like to ask questions. I like to know what I'm getting into. And I just didn't feel like I had the time to do that in order to best serve Vaughn. So we held it off for a year. And then we did the following year. Vaughn and I moved out there for the year when he was at the academy and before they got the dorms.
So I want to jump on behind Raven, actually, because I have a tip about this that actually sort of goes to what Raven was saying. And then also, Jenny, to your question about like what happens when you have like a glut of options. And one thing that's been really helpful for us that I recommend to other people is to think through sort of all the scenarios before the options are in front of you. So I am not a type A personality. I'm definitely a type B, but then I have to imitate some type A stuff just to keep myself organized. So like I'm a SI spreadsheet mom, right? So I make the spreadsheet. It's got all the information about the SIs and like how much they cost and what the registration is, and have I pre-registered, and what photos do you need to bring? And then I keep track of the results as they're coming in and when that stuff is due. But one of the things we do is before audition season even starts, he's never done more than 4 auditions. We narrow it down to these are the 4 that you're doing. And then we go through the scenarios of all things being equal if they all say yes, right? Like we've done the research, and then we have them ranked, right? Like this is my first choice. This is my second choice. This is my third choice. This is my fourth choice. So then you're not sort of in that position where all of a sudden the things are in front of you and you haven't thought about what you want. And I sometimes joke with Alden that like being wanted or being liked is his kryptonite. You know, that moment of feeling so flattered will convince him that he wants something he didn't want, because that feeling feels so good. I just said he only ever does 4, but last year he did the NSIA audition. And it was just like at the end of the season, he was already registered for it. So he went, but he already had his other offers, no big deal. But of course, you're auditioning for like a dozen companies, and they're kind of the dozen mid-tier programs, SI programs. I just want to be clear for people, right? So like, but it's like the mid-tier SI programs, and he'd only ever gone to like the highly selective programs. So you go to this audition, and suddenly you're getting the big scholarship offers from everyone, and they're all coming in at the same time, and it is really flattering to have somebody that you forgot was even watching the audition say, yeah, like, and for school year, why don't you come be in our studio company? Well, you weren't looking for a studio company. Having the decision already made that like, no, my first choice is San Francisco. Oh, San Francisco came through. That's what I'm doing. Like, I don't have to really think it through. And then the other thing is to have a mentor that you trust. So Alden has his like ranked list. And then he's at the Rock. So Peter Stark is his director. So then Amazing. Once he had his results in, he emails Peter, this is what I'm looking at. And Peter just said, nope. So, yep, you're going to San Francisco. Like that was the choice. Go to San Francisco. But that was already what the decision was. Follow through, like not well, you could. Just having the decision already made and then just doing what you planned, I think is avoids a lot of like the emotional reaction stuff, or the end of the summer, people scrambling around because they didn't expect their kids to get a year-round offer. And how can you possibly say no? I've already thought about it. We're not doing it this year. We would like to do it next year. The end.
I think a lot of times people feel like those are once in a lifetime opportunities, and not to negate the fact that sometimes you do have those. That does sometimes happen, but that's not always the case. It's okay to take a beat. It's okay to step back for a second. It's okay to email. I mean, we had an offer at the end of summer, his Boston summer. And so I just emailed them and I said, super, super flattered. We already have an obligation to where he's going this year. We've already signed him up. You know, we don't want to renege on our commitments. And so we would love to maybe come back and audition again next year. We had no assumption that he would immediately be in or anything like that. And we got an email back from the program and they were like, fantastic, just let us know when you're ready. And he ended up not going there, but it was a great learning experience for us in the realm of you don't always have to say yes, like Thea was saying, because the opportunity is in front of you and because you're running that endorphin high of getting something unexpected.
Well, and I do want to add one thing to that, Raven. The whole notion of like getting blacklisted for saying no, that really doesn't exist. And so like for everyone out there listening, if your child, whether you have a son or a daughter, it doesn't matter. If your kid gets admitted when they're 14 and you say no, there's no guarantee they're going to get admitted again when they're 15, but it doesn't have anything to do with your child declining the program. So I just want to really be clear about that. I'm sure we all have stories of programs that our kids have declined and then been admitted subsequent years. So, and I think it's kind of the same with year round. I mean, obviously it's more competitive than summer, but I think we all have stories of where year-round offers have been made, and for a variety of reasons, the dancer has to decline. And I don't think anybody's going to say, well, you can never come here. Like, it's now or never, or that's it. So I just want everybody that's listening to really take to heart what everyone's saying about this, because a no one year doesn't wipe you out from ever being able to attend that program again.
Totally true. And girl moms, it's the same thing. So all the girl moms out there listening, Abby has turned down programs several times, been admitted, and she's turned down year-round offer. So that is a myth that I hope, one thing we do here at Ballet Help Desk is put that myth to bed. I would like that to really go away. But Robert, I'm sorry I cut you off.
No, I agree. And when Noah had an offer for Sarasota for summer intensive, he had already accepted another offer for that summer. And so we had to decline. But Christopher heard the school director reached out at the end of the summer, and said, how'd your summer go? And certainly like to, offer for you to come year round. So yes, I totally agree. If it doesn't work out for whatever reason, it's okay to say no, because if they're interested in your child, in your dancer, they're interested. If it didn't work that way, then that's not where you're supposed to be.
And they may not be interested in the future, but it's not because you declined, right? Like, you could also have gone for that year and then been assessed out after that year, right? Like, they can change their mind from one year to another. And so I think sometimes people audition one year and get in someplace, and then they don't get in the next year. And so they think it's because they declined the previous year, but you're a different dancer the next year. And what they're looking for in a 16-year-old is different than what they were looking for in a 15-year-old. Now you're 16. I mean, last year was the first year that I said to Alden, like, this is going to be the year. I think it didn't work out, but I think this is going to be the year. You're going to see some rejections. You need to be prepared, because, you're 17 now. They're going to expect you to actually be a good dancer, not just a kid who looks like he might grow up to be a good dancer. They're going to expect you to be able to dance. And so we were really prepared for, you're going to get some no's. I mean, it's just different from one year to the next.
Absolutely. Robert, we know that you have kind of a timeout, so we will ask you first, and then feel free to drop off if everyone's still answering, okay? Sure. So I think this has been such an incredible conversation, and we want to kind of end with, I think the ballet world does really well when it comes to recruiting boys. What do you think maybe they could do a little better?
And I asked Noah that question when I saw it on the question list, to get his opinion as well. And he said the good thing is the scholarships and what they offer. I also listened to Peter Stark's podcast that you all had, and they should have a responsibility and not just given something without. If they're given a scholarship, then there's a way to. I think Georgia Ballet had I forgot what they called it, but you had chores to do for the week, or whatever. There was some kind of responsibility. If you got a scholarship, then you also had other responsibilities to do it wasn't just a freebie for nothing. And I thought that was really good.
Oh, like a work study.
Yeah.
That's not uncommon.
Yeah, I think that's really good. Noah said just to continue that and see what they can do to make it like Sarasota. The first year you got a free uniform, and a free pair of shoes. And even though that doesn't sound like much, it is. It's a lot.
So Robert, can I ask, is that just for the boys at Sarasota, or do the girls get it as well? Like, do all the studio company members get it?
This was trainee.
Okay. Do the girls get it as well?
And I do not know the answer to that question, if the girls get it or not. I don't know. But I just remember when Noah was there last year as a trainee that they did get that, through the local studio. I personally, I think that offering the scholarships helps. I know there's huge discussions about that. Is it good? Is it bad? Or whatever. But I think it definitely helps, especially for any of the families with sons who are interested in ballet. And that takes away a hurdle sometimes for that boy. It is what it is. There needs to be more boys. I think there will always need to be more boys in ballet.
Thea, what do you think that ballet does really well when it comes to recruiting boys, and what do you think they can do better?
Do you mean recruiting like little boys to start or big boys?
I mean, honestly, let's sort of spread the whole
Either one.
gamut,
Okay.
because
I think
I think that entry point is so difficult, and then staying through, especially that middle school year, that's really hard.
Mhm.
I think one thing that ballet does a great job of is actually for like the middle aged boys, that intermediate and then advanced boys. I think they do a great job with retention, because I think like the big name boy teachers, Peter Stark, Jeff Rogers, Claudio Munoz, like I think the big name boy teachers, they have a nice network with each other, and they're not selfish. So they pass boys around to each other to where they need to be. They give, I mean, my son is so lucky to be at the Rock with Peter Stark. He gives advice that is honest and gives it freely, and will tell you, you should be here with me for one more year. You should go away now. Or like my son had a relationship with him already because he had been at Boston for the previous summers. It's time for you to go to your round training, like whether that's with me or not. And I've heard that from other parents of boys at other schools, right? Like, people have gone to BBSI, and the teachers kind of get together and figure out, where is this boy going to go? He needs to be somewhere. Which of us can take him? I think they do a really good job with that, and sort of finding boys in the right places where they can continue to thrive. I think something that I wish they did differently, although I think it's a double-edged sword, I think some of the early recruitment efforts for boys in ballet, to try to just get the numbers up, you hear things like, you don't have to wear tights, you can just wear gym shorts. What they do in their class is not real ballet. They're just sort of running around. They like really try to emphasize how much like non-dance it is. And I'm sure there are reasons for that, but for a boy like mine who really did want to do ballet, that's not attractive. And I think you end up recruiting a bunch of boys who then don't want to stay with it when it turns into real ballet.
Well, it feels like a bait and switch almost, right?
Yeah.
Like, come on in. This isn't really ballet.
Right,
It's
we're just
really,
going to do push-ups.
right, exactly. It's really like something else. And once we get them in there, now we can slip ballet on in, and they can, maybe we'll get to keep them.
And I think it's you lose the boys who are then unhappy with that.
Mhm.
But I think also in this weird way, it feels like I can't really think of the word I'm trying to look for, but it's like it almost validates this idea that ballet isn't a thing that boys do.
Mm-hmm.
We have to do it this other way because ballet itself wouldn't be a thing that boys would want to do. And I kind of wish they would stop doing that.
Yeah, you kind of wish they would just be upfront, like, this is dance, and if you like it, great, we'd love to have you, and we'll hold you to the same standards that we hold the girls, and you got to follow the same rules, but this is what we do. This is not, you're not training here in the off season for football. You're a dancer, and
I think there's just better you can recruit little boys with big boys, and not to another plug for the Rock School, but like, so the Rock has so many boys. And so then they do have this program, Rock Reach, right, which is out to the elementary schools, the Philadelphia elementary schools, and they bring them in and they dance for them. So I think little boys seeing big boys dancing, doing ballet, then you have little boys saying like, yeah, sure, I'll do that. Like, I saw what the big boys were doing. Yeah, it looks cool to do a lot of turns and jump really high and pick girls up, and, but it's really the jumping really high and doing a lot of turns, right? Seems really cool. If that seems cool to you, maybe you want to dance. Like,
oh yeah, for sure. And if you like the fantasy element too, of like, I get to be a prince and I get
Yeah,
to be
let
a
me be a
villain and I get to
Yep.
be, just there's that acting piece too, where
Mhm.
it's, you can fully envelop a role as well. And especially if you are at a place that's company affiliated, then the kids get that taste where they get to do those little kid roles, right? Where it's all of a
Mhm.
sudden, you get to stand on stage and, thousands of people clapping for you is intoxicating. So Raven, how about you? What do you feel like the ballet does really well in recruiting boys, and what do you think they could do better?
I still feel like a newbie in this area. My answer is probably just going to echo what Thea and Robert have said. I feel like the scholarships is a fantastic thing, whether financially you're in need of them or whether, it doesn't take the burden off so much, no matter what, it's nice to see that they do appreciate having the men there, especially like Thea said, in that mid to upper range. And then again, just echoing what Thea said, I think a lot of times the younger boys, the younger men are props. It's cute to see a little boy up there making his suspenders go up and down and then standing there while the girls dance around. It's cute when it's like 6 years old and there's not a lot of dancing happening anyways up there. It's a lot of skipping and all that kind of stuff. But as they get older, like Thea mentioned, we will wear tights to class. We do have a uniform. The structure and the decorum and the respect for the classroom, I really would like to see that instilled from the beginning to the end. Not just, okay, well, you're a serious ballet boy now, so now we do this. Because sometimes those habits are really hard to break for some guys. And then my last thing is I think mentorships are great. I think, especially with where we're at, I mean, we are so fortunate to be at Ballet West with Jeff Rogers, who Vaughn feels is very approachable, super great. When he went up to him last year and said, hey, I'm thinking about going to this school for summer intensive, Jeff sat him down and said, I will fully support you in that decision. But here's another school I'd like you to look at. And here are my reasons why. And it was nothing but beneficial reasons. And he really saw his student and saw what Vaughn needed. I spoke to Vaughn when I said that I was, going to do this. And I said, how did you feel last year at Oklahoma? And he said, I feel like Jeff really knew what I needed for the summer. And I'm so glad that he suggested it because I have never felt more open and relaxed and free so that I could just focus on not only learning ballet and technique and everything, but just not feeling like I needed to walk into the studio so stressed out and wound up every time. And for my child, that was a really big thing. So I think the one thing that I would really harp on that the ballet world does right, if you're lucky, is mentors. And I'd like to see more of them. I mean, that's also another thing. I would love to see less gatekeeping, more men, taking on that younger generation and just saying, hey, we have been there, we have done that. Here's where we screwed up. Here's where we did great. And so, yeah, mentorships. And I'm just such a huge fan of those in general.
Oh, I am so glad you're speaking of this because I think in general ballet should do that, but especially for men, for sure, because everything is passed down verbally, right? And a lot of people, they gloss over the hard parts, and mentors I think are so important. And it sounds like everyone's boy could really, really use, I mean, everyone could use a mentor like that, but especially men. And it sounds like your boys have all been so lucky to have such incredible male mentors to really help guide your sons through this very crazy journey of ballet. So Brett, do you want to finish us off and talking about what do you think ballet does well when it comes to recruiting boys, and what you think they could do better?
Sure. So I think I would echo what Thea and Raven said, but one thing I think that the ballet world does really well is fostering a sense of camaraderie among boys. One of the things that I've noticed all the way along with Sam is when he gets to a new summer program, right? Or when he got to Houston at first, you can just see all the boys, they kind of go together. Like immediately they're like, okay, I'm with my people. And there's none of this like, oh, I need to get to know you. Are you a threat to me? It's just, there's this level of camaraderie. I think it gets fostered over the years with the boys. And I think part of it is because, they've been looking for their people for a while. So once they find it, they all kind of gravitate to one another. But I think the company affiliated programs and conservatories do a really good job of fostering that camaraderie. And like I'm seeing it right now in HB2, these guys are going to be competing for jobs, but yet there's this support that was honestly a little bit surprising to me, that like they're talking about, well, I'm not going to go to an audition at this time because I know he's going and I don't want to get in his way. And one of them is going to go to the choreography workshop at the Prix de Lausanne. And rather than the other boys saying, oh, it should have been me, it's like, that guy totally deserved that. Like, good for him. He's the right person and we're so happy for him, and great. And so I think schools do a really good job of fostering that camaraderie. I think when the kids are younger, I think using boys as props is still a problem. And I think also trying to keep the boys in like kind of cutesy, silly, kind of the comic relief whenever they're on stage, it doesn't take them seriously. And I think it would be really good if schools would start to take their boys more seriously. And really, it kind of goes back to holding them to the same standards, right? And so if you've got a male dancer who's really good, great, showcase him. But if he's not, he goes in the back, right? Like he goes in the back with the other weaker dancers. And don't stick him front and center because it's not fair to him. He ends up with a target on his back. His parents can't figure out what's going on, and it's not doing anybody any favors. So I would say, start taking the boys a little bit more seriously. And I know it's not intentional. I know the studios are not doing it on purpose. They're trying to figure out ways to say, we support boys. Look, we've got boys. Let's showcase them, but only showcase them if they deserve it, because it's not fair to anybody otherwise. And then, I just want to make a plug for kind of the greater culture. I think I've written about this, is that if you are a family member who has a boy in your family or your extended family who dances, please, for God's sake, support them. 68% of dads do not support their male dancers. That is unconscionable. So, Raven had talked about how she has extended family members. I have extended family members on my husband's side who have not been particularly enthusiastic about male dancers in our family. And I will leave it at that. Support your kids. I don't care what they're doing. If you've got a girl who wants to be a rugby player, support her. If you've got a boy who wants to dance, support him. It doesn't matter, because they're following what they love, and there should be nothing more important than supporting a kid who's doing what they love.
I feel like that is a perfect place to end it. But is there anything that we didn't cover that you guys would like to talk about? Boys and dance, kind of the floor is open.
I had one thing as Brett was just talking, I know we sort of covered the gambit of boys in dance, but on SIs in particular, like, don't be afraid of the more selective SIs. And often that is where the boys kind of cluster together. Like, there's a few of the really big, I'm going to say, like, competitive SIs. And then there's a couple of less competitive SIs that also pull in a lot of boys, right? Because they give a great big scholarship. But don't be afraid of like the experience at the more selective programs. My son has actually found that it's less competitive in terms of the vibe at the more selective summer intensives. I mean, I kind of theorize, like, by the time they get there, they all know they're good. They all know they're good, and they're just happy to be with a bunch of other guys who are really into what they're doing. But I've heard from other boy parents that they're hesitant to send their boy someplace where they think it's going to be sort of cutthroat. And that hasn't been our experience. So, audition where you want to go and go to the best place you get into.
I would totally echo that. I mean, Sam's been to several very competitive programs, and he never found it to be cutthroat. The reputation of the school overall was cutthroat, but he never found it with the boys. The other thing I would love to add to that is with boys, because it's a small pool. So, right, we're not talking about the same number of programs that are available as there are for girls, right? Like, because you want your boys with other boys. And so if girls have 100 programs that have a lot of really talented girls, there's maybe 20 that has a critical mass of boys. So find those programs, get your sons to those programs where you've got a lot of boys, because it may be the only time during the year where they're with other boys. Also, you really need to figure out where you fit in. Can you hang at those big competitive programs? Because I think Thea had said earlier, scholarships to summer programs are a real indicator of kind of where you fit in the pecking order, right? And so I think it's also important you don't necessarily have to go to those super competitive programs, but certainly audition for them, because if you're getting into all of them and you're getting scholarships, that tells you that you kind of where you are in the ballet ecosystem. And that's really good to know. And you should be doing it every year, quite honestly.
Raven, do you have anything else you want to add?
I would just say, and it's kind of, I mean, I know we're speaking about SI, and it's kind of along that. If you are really, really, really serious about supporting your dancer, your male dancer, find your people. As a parent, you're not always going to have people in your studio, so you're going to have to look elsewhere. And Thea and I know each other because we braved it and put ourselves in a Facebook Messenger group and all went out for, drinks after dropping our kids off at summer intensive. And she has been a great resource. I mean, she's definitely been on the receiving end of some of my texts where I'm going, oh my goodness, XYZ happened. Please talk me down. Or,
But Brett's been that
my
person
kid
for me.
hasn't texted me today. Is he dead? No, he's not dead, Raven. Chill out. Should I text him 20 times? No, 5 was enough. That kind of a thing, because finding your people, whether it's a summer intensive or a new ballet school or making a transition, it really will help you support your son, because you'll have this group of people that you're not always putting the burden on your son by always speaking and rolling in a dialogue. You have somebody to go to. And just lucky for me, I've had people that have been there, done that before me. And I'm really, really thankful for them.
I think that's a really great point. And also, parents, be willing to turn around and reach back to the parents of younger kids. I think that's really important, because our kids are all old enough. I mean, I know Jenny and I went through this because we met when our kids were 13. There just wasn't, the resources weren't there. So remember, there are kids coming up behind your kids, and be willing to reach back down and help pull those parents up. And I will leave you with one story. Like, Sam needed to make a change. And when he was looking at where to go, it was my parent network that got him to Houston. I called 3 moms, all of whom had been, who had boys at the summer program when Sam was 13, and they were all older. And I called every single one of them and said, he has this opportunity in Houston. What do I do? And I'm not joking. I spent probably 7 hours on the phone with these 3 women, basically talking through all the pros and cons of whether or not my kid should pick up and move to Texas. And it was a big move, and we were not sure. And had it not been for those 3 parents, he wouldn't be where he is today. So, thank goodness for the parent network. Like, I agree with you, Thea and Raven, like, it is everything. And now that our kids have kind of gotten there, I think it's so important that we all turn around and we reach back to help others.
I think that's a perfect place to end it. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been an incredible conversation for me to just sit on the sidelines and listen to some very, very wise ballet boy parents. And we really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. Thanks for joining us. Be well. I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks to Raven, Thea, and Robert for being so candid in this conversation. Your knowledge and stories are so valuable, and we appreciate you sharing them with all of us. Just a quick reminder, Emily Brunner's podcast will be released on Friday, November 17th. As Thanksgiving is just around the corner, we'll be taking some time off to celebrate with our families, which means there won't be a podcast or a blog next week. We wish you and your loved ones a fantastic holiday full of joy and wonderful memories. If you liked what you heard on this episode, please take a moment and help us spread the word. Follow us and leave us a review on your preferred podcast platform. Tell a friend and share on your social media. Also, now that your dancer has returned from their summer intensives, please head over to ballethelpdesk.com and leave an anonymous review of the program. Help your fellow dance parents by letting them learn all about the good, the bad, and everything in between. To stay in the loop on all of our latest content, subscribe to our newsletter at ballethelpdesk.com and follow us on Facebook and YouTube. Until next time, have a great day.